You paid for me, now face the consequences. The human changed her fate. The air hummed with voices speaking hundreds of languages, from human dialects to the clicks and whistles of alien tongues. Among the bustle, deals were made, goods were exchanged, and debts were transferred, all under the watchful eye of the Galactic Trade Guild. On the edge of one crowded platform, Sayla sat on a low metal crate. Her long, silver-blue hair shimmered faintly under the station's lights, and her eyes, large and violet, scanned the surroundings with a mix of fear and weariness. She had been sold. Not stolen, not kidnapped, but sold as part of a legal transaction in which she was considered property, a commodity whose value could be measured in galactic credits. It wasn't her first time being sold, but this time felt different. She had been promised a better life, though the words sounded hollow in the sterile corridors of Zarvok Station. The alien official overseeing the transaction scribbled details on a holopad, speaking in a tone that was neither kind nor cruel. Buyer arriving. Prepare the transfer, he said, his voice smooth and practiced, as if this moment had played out thousands of times before. Sayla's mind raced. She expected cruelty, maybe even a harsh punishment for having been sold so many times before. Perhaps this buyer would be like the others, cold, indifferent, motivated purely by profit. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. She had learned, after many painful experiences, that expecting the worst made survival easier. The air suddenly shifted as a small, sleek human ship glided toward the docking bay. It was modest compared to the towering freighters and warships around it, but it moved with precision. The ship's exterior shimmered in silver and bronze panels, catching the station lights like polished glass. A human stepped out. Elias Rook, tall and calm, walked with a quiet confidence that drew the eyes of those around him. His brown hair was neatly trimmed, and his uniform, simple but clean, stood in contrast to the extravagance of other merchants and buyers. He paused, observing the surroundings with sharp yet thoughtful eyes. The alien official gestured for Elias to approach. "This is your acquisition," he said, using the legal term as if Sayla were an object. Elias tilted his head, a slight frown forming. "Acquisition?" he asked in basic galactic common, the universal language of trade. His tone was neutral, but there was a firmness to it that made the official pause. Sayla watched carefully. Humans had a reputation. Across many sectors, they were known as efficient, logical, and sometimes ruthless traders. But there was another side to them, an unexpected cleverness, a quiet way of bending rules without breaking them. She had heard whispers of humans who could change situations without using weapons, money, or threats. Somehow, she doubted this would be an ordinary transaction. Elias stepped closer to her, his gaze calm. "Sayla, is it?" he asked, his voice soft but direct. Sayla flinched slightly. It was the first time someone had spoken to her not as property but as a person. She nodded cautiously. "Yes." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Elias extended a hand, not to grab but to gesture toward the ship. "Come with me, we have some paperwork to sort out." Sayla hesitated. The other buyers would have claimed her immediately, making her feel trapped and powerless. But there was no sudden motion, no force. Something about this human made her curious, cautious, but willing to follow. Inside the ship, the interior was surprisingly warm. There were no cold metal tables or security barriers. Instead, there were simple seats, a small console, and screens displaying star charts and trade routes. Elias guided her to a seat and gestured for her to sit. "We need to finalize the transfer," he said. "But first, I want to clarify something." Sayla's heart raced. What do you mean?" Elias smiled faintly. "I don't intend to treat you as property. The transaction doesn't have to define you." Her mind froze. I don't understand." Elias leaned back, folding his hands. "In the laws of this station, you are considered an asset. But I've already arranged for the debt that caused you to be sold to be voided." Sayla blinked. Her stomach felt strange. Confusion, disbelief, and a flicker of hope battled inside her. You paid it off?" Elias shook his head. "No, I didn't pay anyone. I followed the rules exactly as written. It's a loophole, I suppose, but a lawful one. You are free." Sayla stared at him. Free. The word felt alien on her tongue. She had never experienced freedom in the sense of choice, of control over her own life. She had been bought, sold, traded, and constrained. Freedom wasn't just safety, it was power. "But why?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this for me?" Elias leaned forward slightly. Because humans have learned that systems that treat people as property eventually collapse. They fail to account for intelligence, loyalty, creativity. I've seen how people like you are underestimated. I've seen how underestimated people can change everything. Sayla felt a flicker of understanding. Humans didn't just resist injustice, they outgrew it. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a commodity. She felt noticed. The alien official outside, unaware of the loophole being exploited, called again through the ship's comm. "Buyer, finalize now or the station will proceed without you." Elias pressed a button and spoke calmly. "The transfer is complete. Sayla is under my legal responsibility but not as property. She is now a contracted employee with full rights." The official paused, scanning his data pad. "Impossible," he muttered. This breaks protocol." Elias smiled faintly. "Protocol can be broken legally. I suggest you report it as a new regulation." The official stormed off in frustration, leaving the ship silent except for the soft hum of engines and the faint chirping of distant traffic. Sayla finally spoke, her voice small but steady. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elias replied. "For now, just learn the rules of this ship. Learn what it means to have a choice. That's enough." Over the next few hours, Sayla explored the ship. It was smaller than the freighters she had been transported on before, but it felt alive. Every control panel, every storage compartment, even the small kitchen nook seemed designed not just for function, but for comfort. Humans valued efficiency, yes, but they also valued care. As the stars outside the viewport streaked by in long lines of white light, Sayla thought about the strange turn her life had taken. In one moment, she had been a commodity, bought and sold like a shipment of ore. In the next, she was free, guided by a human who did not seek profit in her misery. Elias came to the viewport beside her. "Many believe humans are harsh," he said, almost to himself. "But in truth, our greatest strength is making systems that refuse to break people." Sayla looked at him, then at the stars, and for the first time she allowed herself a small, hopeful smile. Perhaps this human was different. Perhaps this journey, whatever it held, would not just be about survival, but about discovering what it truly meant to be free. The engines thrummed steadily beneath them. Zarvok Station faded behind, a world of rules and oppression left in the distance. Ahead lay uncharted space, unknown challenges, and the possibility of a future where she could finally choose her own path. And somewhere deep in her heart, Sayla felt the stirring of something she had never felt before: hope. The ship moved quietly through space, leaving Zarvok Station behind. Outside, stars stretched into lines of silver as the faster-than-light engines propelled them toward the edge of known space. Sayla still could not fully process what had happened. One moment, she had been sold like an object. The next, she was free, guided by a human who seemed more interested in justice than profit. Elias moved through the small corridors of the ship with a calm efficiency. He handled every task, navigation, system checks, storage management, with quiet confidence as if every movement had its purpose. Sayla watched him carefully. Humans had a reputation for logic and creativity, but Elias seemed to combine both in a way that made her curious and cautious at the same time. "Do you want a tour?" Elias asked, breaking the silence. Sayla nodded. "Yes, I think I do." He led her through the ship, pointing out each section. The bridge was small but functional, with a holographic display of the surrounding stars and nearby planets. The living quarters were compact but comfortable, with personal spaces for crew members and small storage compartments for belongings. Even the kitchen, simple as it was, had enough room to prepare meals for several people. "It's not a large ship," Elias said, noticing her glance. "But it's enough for what we do. Efficiency matters more than size in space. Humans have learned that too much space without purpose is wasted." Sayla nodded slowly. She had been on large freighters before, filled with hundreds of people and more cargo than she could imagine. But none had ever felt human. This ship was different. It felt alive in a quiet way. "Why did you free me?" she asked again, unable to stop herself. Elias paused, leaning against a console. "Humans have learned something important over the centuries. Systems that treat people as property eventually fail. They do not consider loyalty, intelligence, or creativity. People like you, underestimated, ignored, can change the world." Sayla tried to understand his words. In her experience, humans were often harsh, calculating, and willing to bend rules for profit. But Elias spoke differently. He spoke of strength, yes, but a strength rooted in respect and understanding. "Do you really trust me?" she asked quietly. Elias smiled faintly. "Trust is earned, but I think you will understand in time." For the next several hours, Elias showed her how the ship worked. He explained basic systems, how to navigate through star clusters, how to communicate with distant outposts, and even how to prepare simple meals. Sayla listened carefully, absorbing every detail. Knowledge was power, and for the first time she felt it coming to her freely without fear of punishment or exploitation. As the hours passed, she began to notice small habits of Elias's, how he organized tools so that everything had its place, how he left notes for himself on the console for reminders, and how he approached every problem with patience rather than force. She realized that humans did not rely solely on strength, they relied on planning, observation, and cleverness. "Why do you do all this?" she asked, gesturing toward the careful order of the ship. "Other buyers don't care, why do you?" Elias looked out the viewport, watching a distant asteroid field drift past. "Because humans know that helping people, even in small ways, can create far larger results than taking from them. We've seen it in history. A system built on oppression eventually collapses. But a system built on fairness endures." Sayla considered his words. She had always believed that the galaxy was filled with greed and cruelty, that people only acted out of self-interest. But Elias was proof that another way existed. Perhaps humans truly could change the systems around them, not by fighting, but by creating rules that respected freedom. Over the next few days, Sayla began to take on responsibilities aboard the ship. She learned to monitor navigation systems, organize cargo, and even assist in minor repairs. Elias gave instructions, but he also allowed her to make decisions, to explore solutions on her own. Mistakes were corrected gently, without shame or punishment. Each success, no matter how small, gave her confidence. One evening, as the ship drifted past a glowing nebula, Sayla spoke softly. "I never imagined I could be trusted like this. Everywhere I've been, people expected me to obey, to follow rules I didn't understand, to accept that I was nothing more than property." Elias nodded. "And now, I don't feel that way anymore," she admitted. I feel like I could do something, like I could matter." "That's the point," Elias said simply. "Humans believe that everyone has value even if the galaxy has forgotten it. Systems fail when they ignore that truth. But when people are respected, when they are given choice, they surprise you." The next challenge came unexpectedly. A signal from a nearby outpost flashed on the console. It was a request for emergency cargo delivery. A small transport ship had been damaged in an asteroid field, and critical supplies were needed to stabilize life support systems. Elias explained the situation to Sayla. "We can help. It will require careful navigation through the asteroid field. It's dangerous but manageable if we plan well." Sayla's heart raced. She had never been in such a situation before. Other humans or aliens might have panicked or used brute force to push through. But Elias calmly outlined the plan, explaining each step and the reasoning behind it. "Your role is important," he said. "You will monitor the asteroid density and advise me on the safest path. We succeed together or we fail together." For the first time, Sayla felt that her life truly mattered. She was not just following orders, she was contributing, making choices that affected the outcome. The asteroid field was dense, and the navigation was tricky. Small rocks drifted unpredictably, and even a minor collision could damage the ship. Sayla watched the sensors, noting patterns and calculating safe paths. Elias adjusted the ship's trajectory based on her observations, guiding them carefully through the maze. Hours passed. Sweat dampened her forehead, but she did not stop. Finally, the ship emerged on the other side, the damaged transport and its crew waiting anxiously. "Delivery complete," Elias said calmly, docking the supplies. "Good work, Sayla." Sayla exhaled deeply. "We did it," she said, a mix of relief and pride in her voice. Elias smiled. "No, you did it. I guided you, yes, but the decisions, the observations, they were yours. Humans succeed not by doing everything themselves, but by giving others the chance to rise." The transport crew thanked them, surprised by the small ship's precision. Sayla noticed their looks of respect. Even strangers could see her contribution. For the first time, she realized that freedom came not only from being unowned, but from being recognized as capable. Back aboard the ship, as stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, Sayla reflected on the events of the past days. She had been sold, treated as property, and expected to obey without question. And yet now she was trusted, guided, and allowed to grow. Humans had a strange way of operating, not loud, not forceful, but quiet and deliberate. They built strength through care, fairness, and planning. She wondered what the guild and other buyers would say if they knew a human had disrupted their systems simply by following the rules and respecting someone else's freedom. They would see chaos, perhaps, but she saw opportunity, a galaxy where systems could be better, where people could be more than commodities. Elias noticed her thoughts and spoke softly. Many think humans are harsh, but we have learned that the greatest power is not control, not dominance. It is creating systems where people are respected, where choice is possible. Freedom is not just absence of chains. It is the ability to act, to decide, to grow. Sayla nodded slowly. She understood now. Elias had not only saved her, he had shown her a new way to live, one where intelligence, creativity, and courage mattered more than profit or fear. For the first time in her life, Sayla felt that she could face the future with confidence. She did not yet know what challenges awaited, but she knew that with humans and with Elias, she could navigate them. The galaxy was vast, filled with systems that oppressed, but it was also filled with opportunities to build something better. And somewhere deep inside, Sayla felt the stirrings of something she had never felt before: hope, purpose, and belonging. The ship moved steadily through the dark expanse of space, stars glimmering like distant lanterns. Sayla sat at one of the observation windows, her eyes following the endless trails of light. Since leaving Zarvok Station, her life had changed in ways she had never imagined. No longer a commodity, no longer confined by debt or contracts, she felt for the first time the weight and freedom of choice. Elias sat at the bridge console, his fingers moving swiftly across controls, adjusting course and monitoring sensors. There was a quiet authority about him, a calm confidence that suggested he had faced challenges far beyond the ordinary. Sayla watched him, still trying to understand why a human would go to such lengths for someone like her. It wasn't long before the consequences of Elias' actions began to appear. A series of holographic alerts popped up on the ship's main console, each marked with the emblem of the Galactic Trade Guild. The messages were formal, yet carried an unmistakable tone of warning. Attention, Elias Rook, your recent actions regarding the transfer of Sayla violate intended trade practices. Immediate review required. Sayla's heart sank. She had felt safe, cared for, and valued, but now a shadow of fear returned. Elias, what does this mean? She asked softly. He glanced at the messages and then back at her, his expression calm. It means they noticed. They are questioning the transfer. They may try to pressure me, threaten me, or block our work. It is not unusual when someone challenges long-standing rules. Sayla swallowed hard. Challenge? I thought what you did was legal. Elias nodded. It is legal. I followed the laws exactly, but the system is built to assume humans will follow tradition. When we do something unexpected, even legally, it is seen as defiance. That is the way the galaxy responds to innovation. For hours, the two of them discussed the situation. Sayla listened intently as Elias explained the intricacies of trade regulations, legal loopholes, and systemic weaknesses. She realized that humans had a unique skill. They understood rules well enough to work within them while still bending outcomes toward fairness. The guild assumes power comes from control, Elias said. Humans understand power comes from creating systems that work for everyone, not against them. That is why they are confused and angry about me. Sayla began to see the truth. Elias was not reckless. He was strategic, patient, and quietly daring. He had changed her life without fighting, threatening, or destroying anything. He had simply outsmarted the system, but the guild was not idle. A few days later, a fleet of inspection drones appeared on their sensors, small but numerous, moving with mechanical precision. They were unarmed, but had the ability to disable the ship's engines if necessary. Elias observed them carefully. They are testing us, he said. They want to see if we will comply or resist. They will use regulations, bureaucracy, and small threats. They are not stupid. They know what humans can do. Sayla felt a surge of fear. What if the guild succeeded? What if their systems were too powerful, too ingrained for even Elias to challenge? Elias noticed her concern and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Sayla, fear is normal. But remember, humans succeed not by fighting blindly, but by thinking clearly, observing carefully, and making every action count. That is what we do. Over the next several days, the guild sent messages, demanded meetings, and questioned every move Elias had made. But he remained calm, responding with careful explanations and documented proof of legality. He never raised his voice, never threatened, never attacked. He simply followed the rules and highlighted how the rules allowed freedom when applied wisely. Sayla began to understand the pattern. Humans did not win through force. They won through strategy, patience, and intelligence. They turned what others saw as defiance into demonstration, a proof that a system could work differently, better. Then came the first direct confrontation. A guild envoy, an alien named Vorkal, boarded their ship with official clearance. His presence was imposing, tall, armored, and radiating authority. Sayla instinctively stepped back, unsure of what to expect. Elias Rook, Vorkal began, his voice formal and sharp. Your actions regarding Sayla are unacceptable. You have disrupted trade operations, destabilized market practices, and set a dangerous precedent. Explain yourself. Elias remained seated, calm, and collected. I acted within the law. The transfer was completed according to regulation. Sayla is now free, not property, and the paperwork is fully documented. Every step is legal. Vorkal's eyes narrowed. Legal, yes, but disruptive. You challenge the authority of the guild. You undermine centuries of established practice. The consequences must be considered. Sayla noticed the tension, the rigid expectation of compliance. But Elias did not falter. Consequences must also consider fairness, logic, and sustainability. Systems built on oppression fail. Systems built on respect endure. The law supports my actions. Your concern is with tradition, not justice. The envoy hesitated, unprepared for the clarity and simplicity of the argument. Humans did not argue with anger or threats. They argued with reason. Sayla, observing quietly, felt a surge of admiration and courage. This human had not just freed her. He was changing the way power was understood. She realized that humans had a quiet strength, an ability to turn rules, logic, and morality into tools far more powerful than force. You are bold, Vorkal said finally, though his tone betrayed uncertainty. The guild will review this. Do not expect leniency. Elias nodded calmly. I expect only reason. I follow the law. That is all I need. After Vorkal left, Sayla turned to Elias. Will they punish you? Perhaps, Elias said. Or perhaps they will learn. Either way, I am prepared. Over the next week, the ship continued its journey, but Sayla noticed subtle changes. The guild's messages became more formal, more cautious. They no longer assumed compliance. They sought to negotiate. Small factions within the guild began questioning whether the old rules truly served the galaxy. Sayla felt a sense of awe. The power of humans was not in weapons or numbers, but in patience, intellect, and morality. By simply following the law and caring for others, they had changed minds, unsettled authorities, and created a new path. One evening, as the ship drifted near a glowing nebula, Elias spoke to her quietly. Sayla, the galaxy is full of systems built on fear and control. Humans have learned that these systems fail because they ignore one thing: people. Respect, choice, trust. These are more powerful than threats, more durable than force. Sayla nodded. I see it now. You don't just free people, you teach them to think, to act, to believe they matter. That is stronger than anything else. Elias smiled faintly. And that is why humans are often underestimated. We do not fight loudly, but we endure, and we shape the future quietly but effectively. Sayla felt a warmth inside her chest. For the first time, she felt not only freedom but possibility. She could contribute, make decisions, and even influence outcomes. The fear that had dominated her life was slowly replaced by confidence, hope, and purpose. Then, unexpectedly, a distress signal appeared on the console. Another transport ship, carrying supplies to a distant colony, had been damaged by a meteor shower. The colony faced a shortage of vital equipment, and survival depended on immediate delivery. Elias looked at Sayla. This is your chance to act. You will coordinate with the damaged transport. I will navigate. Together, we ensure success. Her heart pounded. In previous experiences, she would have been told to obey or stay hidden. Now, she was trusted, relied upon, and empowered to make decisions. She felt alive in a way she had never felt before. Hours later, after careful coordination and precise maneuvers, the supplies were delivered. The colony sent messages of gratitude, praising the efficiency and courage of the small ship and its crew. Sayla realized that her choices had mattered, her actions had saved lives, and her judgment was respected. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You see, humans succeed not through domination, but through preparation, observation, and trust. You acted, you decided, you succeeded. That is the human way. Sayla looked out at the stars, feeling a deep sense of pride. She had been sold, treated as property, expected to obey without question, and yet now she was trusted, guided, and allowed to grow. Humans did not rely on fear, they relied on intelligence, fairness, and respect. For the first time, she realized that freedom was not simply being unowned. It was being recognized, empowered, and allowed to contribute. And with humans like Elias, she could face the challenges of the galaxy not with fear, but with courage, confidence, and hope. The Guild might try to punish them, the galaxy might resist, but Sayla now understood a fundamental truth. Humans were not defeated by rules or power, they reshaped them. And for Sayla, that meant the future at last was hers to choose. The galaxy was vast, but news traveled faster than most believed. By the time Sayla and Elias reached the outer rim of the Solara sector, their actions at Zarvok Station had begun to ripple through interstellar trade networks. Small trading outposts buzzed with rumors. A human had freed a young alien woman through legal loopholes, challenging centuries of established practice. At first, many dismissed it as a minor event, a single act by an eccentric trader. But as the story spread, whispers turned into discussion, discussion into debate, and debate into cautious observation. The Galactic Trade Guild did not respond with weapons or public condemnation. Instead, it sent a series of formal notices demanding compliance, threatening sanctions, and questioning the legitimacy of Elias' methods. Each message was meticulously crafted, carrying the weight of authority and centuries of tradition. Elias read the latest notice calmly, as if it were just another routine update. Sayla, however, felt her pulse quicken. The messages were indirect, but the meaning was clear. The guild was unhappy, and unhappy guilds could make life difficult for any trader, human or otherwise. They are escalating, Sayla said, her voice tense. What if they retaliate? Elias shook his head gently. They will try, but retaliation requires action. We are prepared. Humans succeed not through confrontation, but by shaping outcomes carefully. We will respond, but in ways that cannot be ignored or dismissed. Over the next few days, the guild's efforts intensified. Inspectors were sent to trading posts frequented by Elias, questioning their records and asking pointed questions. Some minor suppliers refused to do business with him, fearing guild reprisal. Sayla watched these events unfold with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Why don't we fight them? She asked one evening, as the ship glided past a cluster of pale blue stars. Other humans or aliens might respond with force. Elias smiled faintly. Because humans understand a simple truth, systems built on aggression collapse faster than those built on reason. Force is visible, but it is temporary. Strategy, logic, and legality endure. We will not break the guild. We will make them follow reason, willingly or not. The situation took a dramatic turn when a delegation from the guild's High Council arrived at the outer rim under a formal pretext. A review of trade practices in human-controlled sectors. Sayla and Elias were summoned to the council's orbital station, a towering structure of glass and steel that floated like a prism above a gas giant. The council chamber was vast, circular, and lined with holographic displays detailing trade flows, debt transfers, and interstellar contracts. Representatives from dozens of species were present, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and authority. Elias Rook, the lead counselor began, his voice carrying through the chamber. Your actions regarding Sayla have caused significant concern. You have disrupted centuries of tradition, challenged established authority, and set a precedent that may encourage others to follow your methods. Explain yourself. Elias stood calmly, hands behind his back. Counselors, I have acted entirely within the law. The transfer of Sayla followed every regulation precisely. She is now free, and all documentation is valid. My actions do not break the law, they demonstrate that it can work as intended, with fairness and efficiency. A murmur ran through the chamber. The council had expected defiance, threats, or excuses. Instead, they faced clarity, simplicity, and logic. Sayla could see the council members exchanging glances, their rigid postures subtly shifting. One counselor, a tall, blue-skinned alien with multifaceted eyes, spoke next. Your actions may be legal, but they disrupt the system. Others may attempt similar acts leading to chaos. The guild cannot allow that. Elias nodded. Then the guild must reconsider its definition of chaos. Is chaos the presence of choice or the absence of fairness? Systems that respect intelligence, decision-making, and freedom do not collapse. They endure. Humans have observed this across centuries. Sayla felt a surge of pride. She had thought humans were only strong in combat, only clever in trade. But Elias had shown her another kind of power, intellectual and moral strength, so subtle that even the council struggled to resist its influence. The council deliberated, sending members to review contracts, examine regulations, and analyze the legality of Elias' methods. Hours passed. Sayla waited nervously beside him, still unsure what the outcome would be. Finally, the lead counselor spoke again. It appears your actions are within the bounds of law. The guild must acknowledge this. However, your methods are unconventional and may require monitoring. Any further deviations will be reviewed carefully. Elias inclined his head. Acknowledged, monitoring is acceptable. Reason is the guide that ensures compliance, not fear. Sayla exhaled. The council had not punished them. In fact, they had validated their approach. But she realized that the situation was far from over. The ripple effects were spreading across the galaxy. Back aboard the ship, as they traveled toward the next sector, Elias explained. The consequences of our actions are not only legal, they are cultural. Every trader, every outpost, every observer now knows that humans can challenge tradition with law and reason. That knowledge spreads faster than any fleet or weapon. Sayla thought about this. In every port she had seen humans underestimated, dismissed as inefficient or weak. Yet here was proof that a single human applying logic and morality could shift the balance of entire systems. It's strange, Sayla said quietly. They feared you would fight, but you didn't. You convinced them, Elias smiled. Humans often succeed quietly. Force is visible but temporary, influence lasts. The next weeks were a series of subtle maneuvers. Elias worked with minor guild officials, ensuring that freed individuals were properly documented and that loopholes were clearly defined. He created templates for contracts that guaranteed fairness, choice, and autonomy, all within existing laws. Sayla assisted, learning quickly. She drafted reports, coordinated communication, and even helped advise other aliens who had been affected by similar transactions. She realized that her life had changed completely. She was no longer a passive observer, but an active participant in reshaping the galaxy. Word of their success reached other sectors. Traders, officials, and citizens began discussing the implications. Could it really be possible that one human had altered centuries of tradition without a single act of violence? Could the galaxy survive, and even thrive, on respect, fairness, and reason? Sayla reflected on her journey. From being sold as property to gaining freedom, from fear to empowerment, she had witnessed the quiet, powerful way humans operated. She realized that this was more than cleverness. It was a philosophy, a belief that systems could work better if they valued people. One evening, as the ship drifted past a cluster of icy planets, Elias spoke quietly. Sayla, consequences are not always negative. Sometimes they are lessons. The guild's reaction, the council's review, these are all consequences of our choices. They are proof that change is possible, that systems can adapt when challenged thoughtfully. Sayla nodded. I see now, you didn't just free me. You changed how they think. You changed the system itself. That is the human way, Elias said simply. We succeed by shaping outcomes, not by destroying them. By giving freedom, respect, and opportunity, we create consequences that others cannot ignore. Sayla smiled, a deep warmth spreading through her. She had been trapped, undervalued, and sold, but now she understood the true power of choice. She realized that humans could inspire, influence, and reform, not by force or fear, but by intelligence, morality, and action. As the ship continued its journey, Sayla made a quiet promise to herself. She would not waste this chance. She would learn, grow, and help guide others just as Elias had guided her. She would not be a victim or a commodity. She would be a force for change, a living example of what could happen when humans and their ideals intersected with the galaxy. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew the consequences were only beginning. The galaxy had noticed. And humanity, in its quiet, clever, moral way, was already making its mark. The galaxy was shifting, and Sayla felt it in every port, every trading hub, and every communication channel. Elia's actions at Zarvok Station and the careful handling of the guild had created ripples far wider than she could have imagined. Small traders, alien merchants, and even bureaucrats whispered of the human who had freed one young alien, and in doing so, had challenged centuries of tradition. Sayla sat in the observation deck of the ship, watching stars drift past like silver droplets in the dark. Her life had changed completely. From being sold as property, she had grown to understand freedom, responsibility, and choice. More than that, she had begun to see the impact of courage guided by intelligence. Elias joined her, holding a cup of hot synth tea. "The galaxy is noticing," he said quietly. "Change is slow, but deliberate actions can inspire more than force ever could." Sayla nodded. "I never thought one human could do so much. You didn't fight, you didn't threaten, you just acted fairly and the consequences followed. And now it feels like everyone is watching." "Indeed," Elias said. "And watching closely means they are learning. They will adapt or they will fall behind. The galaxy is not used to humans who lead with reason instead of force." Their first stop was Talara Prime, a busy trade hub where news of Elias' actions had already spread. Aliens from dozens of species approached the ship, seeking advice, legal guidance, and clarification on trade practices. Sayla noticed their hesitant but hopeful expressions. These were beings who had lived under fear, rules, and systems built on profit and control. Now, for the first time, they were asking about fairness. Sayla stepped forward. I can help," she said quietly to Elias. "I know how the systems work. I understand how the rules can be used differently. Maybe I can guide them like you guided me." Elias smiled. "Exactly. Humans succeed when they teach others to act wisely, to make decisions, and to think critically. Your experience is valuable. You have already learned more than most." Over the next weeks, Sayla and Elias traveled to multiple trading outposts. They consulted with guild officials, helped document fair contracts, and ensured that individuals previously treated as property were properly recognized as free and autonomous. Everywhere they went, they left behind a subtle but unmistakable mark, a demonstration that justice and efficiency could coexist. One day, a delegation from the guild arrived unexpectedly at their ship in the orbit of a small moon. The envoy, led by Vorkal, the same alien who had confronted them earlier, spoke with measured authority. "Elias Rook, your methods have continued to spread. We cannot ignore them. The Council has reviewed your actions, and we have an official decision." Sayla and Elias listened carefully as the Council outlined its judgment. The Guild would formally recognize new legal frameworks based on Elias' model. Debt transfers would no longer define individuals as property. Contracts ensuring freedom, choice, and fair treatment would become standard across all member systems. A hush fell over the room. Sayla could barely believe it. Centuries of rigid practice, centuries of fear and control were being rewritten, not by force, not by war, but by careful application of law, reason, and morality. The counselor continued, "Elias Rook and his assistant, Sayla, have shown the galaxy a better way. We recognize their methods and encourage all sectors to adopt similar practices. Let it be known, fairness and choice are not optional. They are essential to a stable and thriving galaxy." Elias inclined his head, calm and composed. "Acknowledged. The galaxy will benefit from systems that respect people and their decisions. That is all I seek." Sayla felt a surge of pride. She had once been powerless, sold to the highest bidder, treated as less than human, or rather, less than a person. Now she had contributed to a change that would affect countless lives across countless systems. Her voice, her knowledge, her actions mattered. Over the following months, the ripple effect continued. Traders began to adopt new contracts, ensuring that freedom and choice were preserved. Guilds in other sectors studied Elias' methods, implementing reforms quietly but steadily. Even those who had opposed him found themselves forced to reconsider. Systems built on respect and fairness were more productive, more sustainable, and more profitable in the long run. Sayla realized that the galaxy was learning the true power of humanity. Not weapons, not conquest, but intelligence, morality, and careful action. By trusting individuals, by respecting freedom, and by applying reason, humans could shape outcomes far beyond what brute force could achieve. One evening, As the ship glided past a cluster of green and gold planets, Sayla reflected on her journey. She had been sold, traded, and treated as property. She had feared for her life and her freedom. But through Elias, she had learned something more valuable than safety, her own power and agency. Elias approached and stood beside her. "You've changed too," he said quietly. "You are no longer just a passenger. You are a leader, a guide, and a voice for others. The galaxy needs more like you." Sayla smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. "I want to help," she said. "I want to make sure others have the chance to be free, to make choices, to matter." "That is the human way," Elias replied. "We succeed by giving others opportunity, not by taking it from them, and you are living proof of what can happen when freedom is respected." Their next mission took them to a distant colony, where infrastructure had been neglected for years due to strict guild control. Humans, and a few of their allies like Sayla, helped establish fair trade agreements, ensuring the colony had resources while preserving autonomy. The locals were cautious at first, but they quickly learned that the humans and Sayla worked for fairness, not dominance. One young trader approached Sayla. "I heard your story," he said. "I never thought someone could change the rules without fighting." "You freed yourself and others. How did you do it?" Sayla smiled. She looked at the stars and thought of Elias' lessons. "By being trusted," she said simply. "By learning, thinking, and choosing, and by knowing that even one person can make a difference when they act wisely." The trader nodded thoughtfully. "I want to help too. I want to change the system in my sector." Sayla's heart swelled. The lessons she had learned were spreading. One person could inspire many. Freedom, respect, and reason were not just ideas, they were contagious. By the time they returned to open space, the galaxy had begun to shift in subtle but powerful ways. Debt transfers that treated people as property were no longer the norm. Free choice, fairness, and responsibility were becoming recognized as essential. Sayla realized that the life she had once feared losing had transformed into a life of impact and purpose. One quiet evening, as they drifted near the edge of the Solara sector, Sayla turned to Elias. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For trusting me, for guiding me, and for showing me what humans can do." Elias smiled gently. "No thanks needed. You took the lessons and made them your own. That is the true measure of success. Humans can show the way, but others must walk it themselves." Sayla felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time in her life, she was not only free, she was empowered. She had changed her fate, and in doing so, had helped change the fate of countless others. The galaxy stretched endlessly before them, filled with challenges, opportunities, and unknown systems. But Sayla no longer feared what lay ahead. She had learned the most important truth. Intelligence, morality, and courage could reshape the universe without a single act of violence. And as the stars streaked past the viewport, Sayla knew that she would continue to guide, inspire, and act, just as Elias had done. The galaxy had been changed, not through war or domination, but through reason, fairness, and the quiet power of humans, and one alien woman who had learned to rise alongside them. In the vast darkness of space, a small ship carried hope, wisdom, and a promise that every individual could matter and that the universe was big enough for fairness, justice, and freedom. And somewhere deep in the heart of the galaxy, the quiet truth echoed, "You can pay for a person, but the consequences of freedom cannot be bought, they must be lived." Sayla looked at Elias and smiled. "We did it," she whispered. Elias nodded. "Yes. And this is only the beginning." The ship glided onward, leaving trails of light across the dark canvas of space, carrying a human, an alien, and a vision of a galaxy changed forever.